Perfect.
All right, Kevin. I'd like to thank you for joining us today on the Hidden Cures Metacast. We want to talk a lot about Web3, blockchain, and kind of where it's going and where it's headed. And you are the expert. And so can you tell the audience a little about yourself, what you do, and who you are?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you everyone for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor being here. Secondly, yeah, sure. I'm Kevin Riedl, coming from Austria. Basically, own a small Web3 software agency in that regard. And yeah, what we do is we mostly develop smart contracts and DApps. We also do a lot of consulting for sure around that, because that's usually necessary to educate the customer. That's what we do most of the time, and that involves so-called NFT collections, decentralized organizations, which is nothing else than some kind of voting mechanism where people can vote with the assets onto some positions, and tokens, and even infrastructure. And yeah, what I'm really passionate about is actually education. So if you have seen my LinkedIn or other social media channels, you'll see that I post multiple times a day some kind of educational content, actually tries to bring value. And yeah, that's actually what I do for the most part. And yeah, I hope I can bring some value to this today. And yeah, I would say any questions at any time, feel free to drop them into the chat bar. I think also I tend to keep things highly interactive, because that usually helps to get things into the direction that helps everyone the most. I would say, yeah, Robert, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but yeah.
Yeah, so I find it really interesting that you have focused on education, and more so just children like in the ages of in high school, learning to write smart contracts and codes. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, maybe a little bit of something. I'm teaching children, 10 to 15-year-olds, like every summer for the past X years. Basically, I work with a non-profit organization in Austria in that regard. And yeah, this year we did the first ever smart contract or blockchain course, which was really high risk because we had 5 days kids had to develop. It was an actual software development course. And yeah, at the end of the week, like on Friday, they had to present it on a big stage to their parents, to other teachers and so on. And yeah, that's definitely a big thing, especially because I didn't know if that actually works, And learning how to develop a smart contract is not an easy task, especially because you actually need to have a lot of background. You need to understand wallets, you need to understand how do transactions somewhat work, and what is the blockchain, why does it exist. Yeah, that was let's say, the overall structure. And what we do now is we decided to do the same format, but online this time, and for Web3 in general, which means not actually developing smart contracts, but giving a general introduction to children in January, once in German and once in English, so that we have some kind of accessibility here. And yeah, got already quite some registrations, around 60, sorry. That's quite cool, especially considering that, yeah, I would say parents or children are not that easy to reach when it comes to such a high niche topic. And yeah, maybe to give you some context how we actually did it, I think that's something that you might be more interested in. besides what we do. And yeah, I would say, give you some context. Yes, in summer we had 5 days to do that, to give them, let's say, the tools to develop a smart contract. And what they were able to do in these, I would say actually 3 days, because the first day was theory majority, like general introduction, storytelling, like 99%, really came from, let's say, 2008, Bitcoin, why governments actually dislike blockchain, inflation, why everything gets more expensive, and all these kind of things. I talked about scams, wallets, and yeah, all that stuff basically. And as you can imagine, that was like definitely the funniest and most exciting day, all of them, because the kids got like super I would say, yeah, extroverted, excited at that time, asked a lot of highly contextual and deep questions. And that was already, I would say, a great starting point, because understanding why this technology is actually here helped them a lot throughout the week when we actually got to develop things. So what we did is we talked at Monday, basically, what are smart contracts, and even had a quick look at the code itself. And on the next day, we basically jumped right into it, right? I explained what NFTs are, what tokens are, and that was basically the goal. I either told them, if you want to do something easier, let's try a token, regular security token, that you can trade on the blockchain, which is already, I would say, exciting enough. And yeah, and a separate NFT collection. And the fun thing is, these kids were, I would say, crazy. 3 teams out of 6 developed a token that is tradable on the blockchain. 4 teams of 6, which already means that some teams made multiple projects these days.
That's very cool.
Awesome. Glad you like it.
Yeah, that's really exciting stuff.
Yeah, teaching the youth about, Web3
and it's basically the future. So you guys are really giving these kids like a leg up on like what's really coming down in the future. That's very awesome. I wish I would have learned this in 2008 when it first came out.
Yeah, well, at that time, Bitcoin was slowly emerging the following years, right? There was no real smart contract discussion or something like that. So, but yeah, fully agree, me too. Would have loved someone in that regard. But yeah, that's definitely an exciting thing. For us, it's less about, let's say, what it brings us, It's more something, for us, sure, it's great marketing, it's great branding, right? But in the end, it's just fun. Because if you see the passion or excitement in children's eyes, that's just cool. It's something different besides the daily business. Yeah, but one thing I would state here is I don't think education per se is actually the goal for Web3. Because from my point of view, I guess it should be more like abstracted away. People shouldn't recognize that they use blockchain. For sure, if you want to build a product or project, then you need to know. But otherwise, in best case, you don't.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? You talk a lot about that on LinkedIn and a lot of your posts about businesses not getting into Web3 and really doing their homework. Can you talk a little bit about that strategy and kind of what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, sure. I would say the most important thing when any company approaches us is why. Why do you want to get into Web3? And it's less about, let's say, ethical discussion. It's more about the use case, the business case. What does Web3 for you? What would make your product better if you add, I don't know, NFTs or DAOs or whatsoever to it? There needs to be a reason to utilize that technology. You should never go in any business, in any startup, tech first. It should be always business case or people first, understanding what we need to build, and then comes the how. And if the how includes Web3, awesome. And I definitely think that a lot of business can benefit from Web3, but I'm also convinced that not every business should be in Web3, because there's a general rule of thumb that says blockchain is slow and expensive in comparison to centralized solutions. So there's a reason why centralized databases and centralized companies like Facebook, Google, and so on, or Alphabet, Meta now, have such a high, let's say, ability to scale, are such reliable, are that large. And yes, Web3 companies can and will become really, really large as well. But it doesn't make sense to put everything on the blockchain. It just degrades UX because you always need to pay for things. It makes things slower and it complicates things. It makes development of the product much more expensive as well. As you might already know, Web3 developers are super expensive. And yes, the price will go down the next few years because more people get into it, but that won't change. It's still, let's say, a special skill. There are much more Web2 developers than Web3 developers. That won't change like for the next 5 to 10 years, highly likely. So that's definitely something to consider as a company, I would say.
And can you talk about the differences between Web3, the metaverse, kind of like how it all works? You know, Starbucks has entered this market, Macy's has entered this market, and they've kind of entered it through the metaverse. And now Starbucks just released their NFTs on Polygon. But I still think I think people think metaverse NFTs are all, Web3 is all one thing. You kind of break it out and kind of explain how each one of them is kind of different. And when you say Web3, what does that encompass? When you say metaverse, what does that encompass?
Yeah, sure. Great question. For sure, everything that I say now is just opinionated. Right? For sure, there are definitions out there, but in general, especially when it comes to the so-called metaverse, I have heard all kinds of definitions. Some people say that metaverse is a 3D world, just like spatial. Some people even claimed, and I'm really talking about an expert here that wrote a couple of books and is really well known, even states that the metaverse can be in textual format, so it doesn't even need to be visual, to the necessity to utilize blockchain or not. So there's a wide range of what the metaverse actually might be or is not, if it's already there, if it already exists or if it doesn't. So the metaverse is definitely the most difficult thing to define, especially also when it comes to AR, VR, how does that play into it? From my point of view, I definitely think the metaverse, it's just a term, but I guess the hype around all of it would be like a virtual world where you can actually own things, which means it necessarily involves blockchain in some kind of sense, and you are able to actually be immersed in that, which is a buzzword by itself, but just actually means you utilize virtual reality or augmented reality technology, so you are actually inside the world. You're not staring at the screen, and look from it at on the outside, you know. That would be my metaverse, let's say, somewhat definition. When it comes to Web3 in general, is for me really simple. That means everything that basically involves blockchain. That's Web3. Web3 is just a fancy new name for crypto, just a fancy new name for blockchain. That's Web3 for me. Which means you have a website that opens or uses your wallet in some kind of way, or reads on the blockchain or writes to the blockchain. I don't know. But that's Web3 for me.
So I'm really new
that
to
also
this.
includes, yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I'm really new to this, and you guys used the word Web3. Did you guys have a Web 1, a Web 2 prior to Web 3?
Yeah, great question. When we look at the actual history of the internet, right? I'm too young to actually know the years, but around 2000, there were the first couple of websites, right? The so-called Web 1. And it was, you could imagine it like a really, really super basic and cheap looking website. It's just sometimes a blank white screen with some text on it.
Mm-hmm.
So basically looking like a blog post without any nice styling or whatever. So it's really just like a book, a white screen plus the text, for example. Things like that, like a web that doesn't move, that doesn't adapt to your user, for example, that's called the Web 1. And at some point, we got social media, we got platforms like Facebook, we got many other apps that are interactive. I would also count Google to that for sure.
Wow.
Because you can type in on the website, or you have an identity somewhere on that website, and the content, the information that you see is dynamic and completely personalized to you. So it's not a static website, a static page where every user on the planet sees the same content, but instead it's dynamic. Things can change and will change. Things might move, are animated, things like that. That's Web 2. And yeah, now we have possibility to actually own things thanks to blockchain and wallets. And that just adds new business models on top of that. So that's the thing actually. I hope that answers the question.
It did. Thank you.
Somewhat
That was
easy manner.
Yeah, that was very clear and concise. That very much made me understand. I was like, oh, okay, so that's just like the first version, and then our second version. The way I kind of thought of it was like the original internet when our computers were like black with green fonts, and then our 20th century internet, and now we're going into like the 3D virtual world, and we're going into virtual reality.
Yeah. As mentioned before, that's all just terms. You know, what is, it's actually, from my point of view, just an opinion all the time. Web3 is definitely something that's more closely defined, but Metaverse and most of the other things are highly dynamic, I'd say, in terms of the definition.
Kevin, so we kind of look at spatial, and we saw the opportunity as we kind of move into a Web3 kind of world. You kind of see like this is where someone's website will be, so not necessarily going to the Web 2 type of website where you just click in Google, but coming to a space like this is more interactive, where your community can interact, kind of combines the social network with a space that's yours that has information or content about you and your company. Kind of see that as the first step in integrating people into this new universe, or do you think this is just a fad and it's going to go away?
looking at Web 1 and Web 2, we still see both coexist. Web 1, we still have static websites. For example, most company websites are in fact somewhat Web 1 because the content doesn't change, right? Definitely some things that move, that are interactive because you can fill out a form or things like that. But most company websites and project sites are very much static. So one could argue that it's somewhat Web 1. So I think it's the same for Metaverse Web 3. So basically, these company websites will, in my opinion, definitely stay there, will be still used as a means of distributing or showcasing information. But there will definitely also be some kind of occasions where, I don't know, maybe when it comes to meetings or just gamifying things, meetings or whiteboard sessions or maybe talks like this, that's definitely more fun than a regular, let's say, Zoom call, something like that. These kind of things, yeah, I definitely think that, and especially when it comes to further gamifying this with, I don't know, with popes, which means you get some kind of badges or medals for participating, some kind of webinars and so on, and you can showcase that on your profile. I don't know, things like that, I guess are definitely coming and will be more widely adopted. What I don't think, it really depends on the business model for sure. If you're a fashion company, I fully comply with that and fully think that they will have like locations in the metaverse. But if, let's say, you're a regular company, I don't think you need or will have actual building in the metaverse. I could be wrong. Maybe it's going to be a place to showcase case studies, I don't know, to present past prior projects to your potential clients, or grab a full nice coffee, a first talk or something like that. Consulting sessions could be. I don't know, and it might depend on the business. But yeah, let's see. I don't know. That's my answer.
So we made you a little card, and I don't know if I can bring it over to you so you can see it. Scale it up a little bit. And basically we would create badges like this. I don't know if you can see it or if I'm just moving around the screen.
Can you do a little 360 view because I'm recording, so I can get like a nice little 360 of it?
Yeah.
Also, I can see it, by the way. Yeah.
Perfect.
And so when it comes to badges and kind of what you were talking about, Spatial does something cool where it locks down content or rooms based off of NFTs, or they're calling it NFTs. So NFTs that you have in your wallet, which would allow only a certain amount of people to come into this room, or certain people that have your NFT to come in your room, to come in this room. What do you think about concepts like that when you talk about meetings or just business, right? So if I'm Starbucks and I have a certain NFT that gives me, like you were talking about, the gamification, that gives me access to rooms that allow me to interact or talks with the CEO, is that something or somewhere you see the industry going, or is, again, that's just, we're just too far away from that?
The question is twofold for me, to be honest. Yes, I definitely think the industry is going that way, simply because it's a standard way of approaching these kind of things. You know, as a company, well, I need to launch an NFT or token, and then I can check, does that user own this token and has access to this? But that's nothing new. That's something that you could have done already 10 years ago. So you don't need necessarily Web3 or blockchain for that. You could have just saved it into your regular database. You could give people the opportunity to sell their, let's say, ticket on that marketplace in a centralized way. And all these things exist already. Just look at console games. We have accomplishments, we have skins, people trade gaming accounts, all that kind of stuff. And that also branches out in many other industry sectors as well. So it's definitely nothing new, which is good, because that means the business model, business case is here. But it also means that it's not necessarily needed to do that on the blockchain. So thinking about the UX perspective, that you need to own a wallet to actually do these kind of things, makes it more difficult, because you need to think about how do we give a user a wallet, maybe even without them recognizing. Just look at Reddit, for example, that launched their avatar NFTs. People didn't even know these are NFTs in the beginning. And yeah, that's the actual thing that you would need to do. Make it so abstract that people don't even recognize that you use this technology. So that makes it more difficult, actually, again. And so the question for me is, or I'm quite convinced with that, and I know many people that agree with that as well. Many companies, also big ones, do it for, let's say, targeting the younger generations. So it's less about, is that the perfect solution for the problem that I want to solve, but more about targeting younger people that are convinced and like that technology. So I think it's more about that most of the time when companies go into the metaverse, when they, I don't know, sell virtual fashion. For sure, that's a business case, separate one. But these kind of things, I think it's less about, oh, well, we need blockchain, we need decentralization, because we want to give power to the people. If they actually would like to do that, then things would look much different. And that's definitely not the case. So that's my take, actually. Hope that answers the question.
I couldn't agree more. I think people like the idea of NFTs, but the actual execution of how does that get into somebody's hands becomes quite difficult, right? Like in so many different ways. Do you ever see that becoming easier where it's, I get that everyone has to have a wallet and it's kind of how it works on the blockchain. There's been a lot of companies that have kind of come in now and have been that third party. I think we call them dApps. Am I correct in that?
Well, it definitely gets easier. Many companies focus on UX, right? Improving the user experience. When, let's say, there are already solutions out there where you can log in with your Gmail account, Facebook, I don't know, whatever you want to, or email address. And that solution automatically generates a wallet behind your back that you can use. So there are solutions out there, and there are definitely many more things that are being built right now that solve these kind of things. But the question always is, if you use these kind of things, then you always give up some kind of decentralization and ownership and power aspects, no matter how decentralized that solution claims to be. Because it's always an abstraction. And the more abstract something is, which means you make it easier for someone to use something, because you hide things behind the curtain, I think is the correct word, then you always have some kind of power dynamic here. You always have information that the user maybe doesn't have, or some control that the user doesn't have. So that just means, well, why do you use blockchain then at all? Because blockchain isn't there for, let's say, the two big claims that people on companies have is decentralization, control, which means nobody can take that asset away from me. That's, in my opinion, the strongest value proposition. And then we have that much, much weaker, but somewhat maybe valid claim. It's about interoperability, which means that you can exchange these assets easily between different companies, organizations, because you have a independent data layer, which means the blockchain itself that saves your NFTs, for example, your assets, your tokens, what you own. And that definitely makes it easier to some extent, but for quite some time it will be much more difficult because most people don't have the know-how and most UX solutions aren't there yet or not mature enough yet. So the only reason to use blockchain right now for me is to actually go into that ownership and decentralization route. So yeah,
can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right?
Yeah, and can you talk more about that, Kevin, when you say ownership? Are you talking more like a DAO, or like what do you mean by the best case scenario for using blockchain? Like what type of businesses should be using it?
DeFi, decentralized finance, for example, that's one of the strongest use cases out there, which means you own, for example, Bitcoin, you own Ethereum, you own some kind of token, and the bank can suddenly say, well, we don't give it to you, or well, we are bankrupt, or well, you are sanctionized, which is already being battle tested thanks to Tornado Cash and whatever solutions without trying to confuse you now. But what I want to say is blockchain enables you to actually own money, just as you own actually your cash, in your own actual wallet at home. So cryptocurrency actually enables you to own these kind of things in a digital way. If you have something on your bank account, you don't own it. The bank didn't even have it on their bank. They usually lend a lot of it to other parties. And then these parties maybe lend it away again. And that gives, let's say, an incredible large leverage. And that's why banks oftentimes get in trouble.
So
if you lend the same $100 to 10 people, that's an issue.
So basically when you say decentralized, you say moving away from like those traditional banking systems. I'm maybe some context. I own a small part of a traditional finance company as well. And we have organized a conference in October in Frankfurt, Germany, where we invited asset managers, bankers, like all these traditional people. And they didn't know that I'm a smart contract developer actually. And they pitched, or some of them pitched blockchain to me. All of them know, no matter how conservative they are really conservative oftentimes, they know that blockchain, DeFi, decentralized finance is the future, all of them. There's not a single doubt anymore. They're convinced. And that's the crazy part. I'm talking about London Stock Exchange, as people from there, and so on, and the list goes on. That's just crazy.
Wow.
So that's definitely, I would say, the strongest use case.
Wow.
And the most mature.
That's amazing.
That's very interesting.
And so,
Yeah.
well,
definitely.
I think the Gary V's of the world and the kind of what the rhetoric is out there in the mainstream is NFT is a way to own a collectible, right? So very much like finance or social media or anything, like it's a way to actually say or to say you were there. Like I always use Facebook and listening to the CEO of Facebook. I can never remember his name. What's his name?
Zuckerberg?
Yeah, Zuckerberg. And he was on there talking with kind of, why he's against iPhone and communication and how a phone was created, and he's creating a communication, a different way to communicate. And a lot of his ideas were NFTs were a way to, if you said you were at a restaurant and you took a picture, but you're really at your home, or you stole the picture off the internet and you kind of faked being there. NFTs were a way to show like there was social currency. So it was like, actually, I actually own that car. I actually own that house. And he kind of envisioned a world where you'd walk into a place like this in a metaverse, and on your wall would be all the NFTs that you own that were basically things that you owned in real life, but ways for people can see them here. So for instance, if you owned a Rolex, but you didn't wear your Rolex all the time, and people were allowed in your room, they'd be like, oh, he actually has a Rolex. And there's a way of like social currency. And so it's interesting how you talk about the DeFi market. What do you think about Zuckerberg's idea of social equity with NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, of claiming ownership of actually owning or being in a place?
Well, the question always is, does it need to be decentralized, saved on the blockchain? But yeah, I definitely like that. So I would say this goes actually in the direction of so-called POAPs, which is nothing else as an abbreviation for Proof of Attendance Protocol, which means you get an NFT on a blockchain that you don't need to pay gas for, because that company that issues those POAPs pays for it, and those NFTs are actually used to prove that you attended an event like this, for example. So we could issue POAPs for this event if we would have planned to do that. So that would be, that's already there, and I really like this. The question just is, will people care in, let's say, 2 years, if they, it's just a souvenir, For some events it's nice, but for most of them, people don't actually care. Right now it's fancy, in 2-3 years maybe it's not. So that's the question.
Yeah, and so Nike kind of had this idea, and I thought it was a brilliant idea. And so what Nike said was, cool, if you come in and you have our NFT, now when we drop new shoes, instead of bots being able to jump in here and buy up all these shoes and then resell them, the only way you can actually buy these shoes is if you have one of our 1,000 NFTs that were given away just for attending an event, right? And now you get first access to their shoes when they drop. So the 1,000 NFT holders get to purchase 2 shoes at that point because they attended an event. And that's really where the utility of the NFT comes in. Can you speak a little bit more about the utility and kind of how they can take that Hope NFT and then build those type of functionalities into it? And does that need to be a smart contract?
Yeah, great question. Basically, that's always the thing, right? Does it need to be a smart contract? Which means an NFT is a smart contract by definition, but you could solve it in a centralized database as well. There's not many reasons why you can't do that. Well, you can provide marketplace to sell these things. You can do a lot of these things. And for some industry sectors, these marketplaces exist. So that's the first question. Does it need to be a smart contract? That's always the thing, right? The advantage definitely is if it's really easy for you to create the NFT, because you can use one of these no-code tools, which means you just click a couple of buttons and you have your NFT, then it's definitely easier to use that than actually building some kind of app or something like that where you can buy and sell something in a digital way. So the blockchain definitely enables you to make this check out and buying selling process of assets, any kind of assets, much more streamlined and much more easier, right? So that's definitely the case. So maybe from a complexity standpoint, that's definitely a big plus. And from the utility side, to get back to your original question, if I'm not mistaken, that's a cool part, yeah, because there's a standardized way of validating if you own something. It's easier for other solutions, for example Discord, to check do you own that NFT. If you wouldn't have that, then Discord would need to go to your own custom REST API and check if that specific user has that. That definitely makes things much more easier, way easier. I guess that's the main benefit of using NFTs in that regard for providing utility, that it's super easy to sell, buy, and prove that you own these things. And what kind of utility, the sky is the limit. You can do anything that you can imagine.
Right. I can speak for myself on this, but NFTs without utility don't really make sense to me. I guess that's where the art world kind of is, right? So you're buying a piece of art and then you're just saying, hey, I actually own this art, or I've been to this event. Without utility, I think that's kind of what is destroyed, and you and I have had this conversation before, but I really believe that's kind of what has been destroying the crypto world and the Web3 market when it comes to just normal people, right? People that go to work every day and don't have to deal with Web3 or think about Web3 at all. They always go back to it's fake, it's not real, you get nothing from it, it's just a money grab. How do you think we change that mindset, and what are different ways, when you are utilizing NFTs, and what type of utilities, and does it have to be on the blockchain? Can it be something easy at first that kind of gets people into the blockchain? Like, how do you see us 2023? How do you see this $1 billion market per se take off?
Well, as mentioned before, there are definitely reasons for doing it on the blockchain and also reasons for not doing on the blockchain. From the cost perspective, complexity side point of view, and I would also say from the UX perspective right now, it would make sense to do it in a centralized way. When it comes to process,
hey, Kevin,
you want... Yeah, sure.
Can I just ask you a question right there? You keep saying it's expensive, but I mean, really, I can jump on Polygon. I can take this digital asset that I made right here. I can go on an OpenSea. I can create a contract. I can mint it, and then I can basically sell it, right? I mean, I can transfer it. There's a lot of different things I can do with it that puts it on the blockchain. That really doesn't cost anything other than time. When you say it's cost heavy, can you talk a little bit more about that, just so that we get a firm understanding of what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, sure. Two things regarding that. In general, first thing, that's when we talk about Polygon, a really tiny cost, right? Indeed. That's a transaction fee. You always need to pay for transactions. If you do it in a centralized way, there are no transaction fees. First thing. When we talk about, let's say,
just for like everyone that's a beginner, can you just talk a little bit more in those two things?
When you do anything that involves the blockchain, which means you want to buy, sell, create an NFT, for example, which is a digital artwork, then you need, or you basically save something on the blockchain, which is just a database that's distributed around the world. So there are many computers, one is in Asia, one is in the US, and both have the same set of data. And for that very same reason, you need to pay these people that have these servers to actually save your data, your information, which means you just bought this piece of art. And these people around the world, all of them need to save that. That costs money. On some blockchains, it costs way more. On some, it costs way less. It can go from a couple of cents or even a fraction of cents to hundreds of dollars, depending on demand of the blockchain and the type of blockchain. Right now, all of them are quite cheap because bear market. Because of the prices
Kevin,
falling. Yeah.
Kevin, can you just describe that? And you did a little bit. Just what I really been trying to get to is just the blockchain in general and how it works differently than, right now I hold the information. I'm the only one with the information on a Web2 platform, right? So if I said you had this, I'm the one who controls the data, right? And what we're paying fees for is to lock it in and saying, even if a computer goes down in the US and in Asia, there's still 2,000 other computers that hold that same data and it can't be changed. And so it's locked in. And so when you own it, and there's no other way around it. Is that a fair way of saying that in the simplest terms possible?
I would say 50-50. It's completely correct. Nothing wrong about that. The thing is, if a computer goes down and then another one is still there to hold that data, that's something that's actually a Web2 principle. Right? Google has many servers as well. If one of them explodes or burns, Google is still there and working. What the blockchain does, and you said that perfectly, it doesn't allow any of these servers to just change the information. And that's what it is about. If something is saved on the blockchain, the theory or game theory around it is nobody can manipulate it, nobody can change it without the majority of these people that control the network agreeing to it. And usually the incentives, the stakes for these people operating that network are really high that they are honest with it. So there's a really low incentive most of the time that actually try to scam people. And that's why the blockchain is so powerful. So that's the main thing. That's why DeFi, decentralized finance, is so exciting. There's no bank, nobody that can take it away from you, because nobody can change the information who owns something. And that's the powerful, that's the cool thing about it.
Yeah, see, that's the part, that's the part when we talk about business, and that's the part that I love, right, is and we're going to talk a little bit into the future, but I love the idea of DAOs, and just like decentralized banking, I believe so many companies and so many big companies should be more transparent. And more than anything, what I rest why I'm in this industry and why I want to be in this industry is I like transparency, right? I like the idea that you can see what's going on and everyone's books are open. And I like that in cannabis, right? So I like it in taking things that people see in the dark, like banking is very dark, especially here in the United States and kind of how we look at everything, right? You said something earlier that I don't know that everyone understands, is that a bank just takes $100 and gives that same $100 to 10 people, right? And then just charges them interest. And to see that decentralized, what that means is like being able to see where every dollar goes. That's scary for some people, but very cool for other people, right? And when you talk about not every business needing blockchain, do you not like the idea of being able to see transparently into companies via blockchain, or do you just think it's too hard to get there?
An example. Let's talk about. Okay. First of all, there are different types of blockchain. I don't want to get too deep into that, but when we talk about blockchain in this context or in terms of Web3, we always talk about so-called public blockchains, which means the data that you save onto that network, that blockchain, is visible to everyone. Everyone can see it, everyone can verify it, everyone can save something onto the blockchain if they pay that fee to these people operating the network. But there are also other types of blockchains that restrict that ability, which means only some people can save data on the blockchain. Only some people can see the data that is saved on the blockchain. That, for example, then involves use cases like logistics. You don't want the whole world to see where your goods are currently are and who it at the very same moment actually has it, That can be cool for some tiny use case, because most of the time it's a security issue. If you transport something really valuable, then you don't want people to see that all over the world, right? But still, it can make sense to use a blockchain because these parties, these people that are involved in that supply chain throughout that journey, don't trust each other. So they evaluate who had the package last before it got lost, for example. These kind of things. That's first part of the story, where the public blockchain, for example, the things that we talk here about don't make sense necessarily. There are many other things like that. Then we get into things like that sound really silly, and I think they are. Why do you need a decentralized dog or cat app? And I had a potential customer that tried to build something like this. But why do you need to save that data in a decentralized way? Who don't I trust here? Who don't I trust that I don't know about that information, but instead saving it on a public blockchain so that everyone can see it? There are no reasons for that, at least no reasons that I can see. And that's definitely a business that I don't think should resolve completely around Web3. Maybe there are some tiny things where it could make sense, but for 90% around this specific use case, it probably doesn't. So these kind of considerations one always has to undertake. What's the value that blockchain would add here? Who don't I trust? Who don't I trust? That's the main question.
Kevin, I'm so sorry. I know that we're running up against time, and I know we've kept you for way too long, and you've been awesome and amazing. I think we've learned so much. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask Kevin while he's here? And we hope to have him back on to talk more about this. I think it's such a interesting subject kind of as we're moving forward. But I think you've done a great job. Does anyone have any questions that's here?
I think I asked my questions already.
I think that if I had a question, my only question would be just referring to the NFTs. Do you see the NFTs getting any more advanced, or how I say, more streamlined in the future, towards more of a common currency among businesses and other companies and stuff like that? Do you think you'll see more people trading them?
100%. I think the prices will definitely go further down, and because the supply, which means many more businesses, projects, and so on creating NFTs, will also lower the general price tag for these kind of things, because there's just way more supply than demand at some point, or already actually. But yeah, it's a cool way of engaging people, of building a community. It's adding, just having an NFT and say, well, as Gary Vee does it, if you know him, if you own that specific animal NFT, this week you have a chance to jump onto a call with me. Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's more difficult with other things. So definitely think so.
Awesome, thanks. Appreciate that.
Awesome.
Well, do you have any questions?
That should be it for me.
Cool, Kevin. I want to say thank you. You are awesome, man, and we hope to have you back. Keep up the good fight, man, and we'll continue to follow you and what you're doing. And again, hopefully you can come back on and talk a little bit more about kind of finish these conversations.
Yeah, sure. As said, thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, it was really a pleasure. I hope it helped. Oh yeah, I'm really standing in